Today I'm going to tell you the story of a man who, without realizing it, made the biggest mistake of his life in the middle of a party. His name was Ricardo Morales, an emerald dealer who, unknowingly, offended Pablo Escobar's wife at Hacienda Napoles. The decision that the boss made about him changed everything forever, although his reaction was not what anyone expected. Help us reach 650 likes on this video. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more real-life stories like this one. The night of March 15th, 1985, descended over the Magdalena Valley like a dark blanket filled with stars. At Hacienda Napoles, Pablo Escobar's most luxurious jewel, multicolored lights bathed the gardens, creating an almost surreal atmosphere. The warm air carried the scent of tropical flowers, blending with the French perfumes of the ladies and the cigar smoke from Medellin's most influential men. It was one of those parties Pablo often hosted. Gatherings meant both to celebrate and to remind everyone of his power. This time, the occasion was the birthday of Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, one of the cartel's closest partners. More than 200 people had gathered in the state's vast gardens. Cartel leaders, politicians, businessmen, artists, and even a few carefully selected journalists. The colonial-style mansion gleamed with its white columns and wide balconies. From the large speakers came vallenato music, performed live by a group brought from Valledupar. The tables were overflowing with delicacies, lacona, bandeja paisa, arepas, empanadas, and fine foods imported from Europe. French champagne flowed endlessly, while waiters, impeccable in their white jackets, moved among the guests with the grace of trained dancers. On one of the side balconies, away from the noise, sat Victoria Eugenia, and now, Pablo's wife. She wore an elegant ivory Christian Dior dress, a gift Pablo had brought her from his last trip to Paris. Her brown hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and around her neck shimmered a necklace of emeralds that glowed like tiny green flames under the lights. At 23, she had already spent 7 years as the wife of the most feared and powerful man in the country. She was chatting calmly with Marta Ochoa, sister of the famous Ochoa brothers, also key figures in the cartel. Marta, delicate in appearance but strong in character, watched everything with sharp, lively eyes. The two women spoke about their children, the new boutiques opening in Medellin, anything that didn't touch on their husbands' business affairs. That was an unspoken rule never to be broken. The women didn't give opinions, didn't ask questions, and never got involved. "And how is Manuela?" asked Marta, referring to Victoria's youngest daughter, barely a year old. "Beautiful. Thank God," Victoria replied with a tender smile. Pablo adores her. Sometimes I think he spoils her too much. Imagine, he's already ordered a pony from the United States to give her when she turns 3. Marta laughed. "They're all the same. My brother Jorge would do the same for his daughter. If they could, they'd bring down the moon for them." At that moment, a waiter appeared with a tray full of champagne glasses. Victoria gracefully took one, smiled in thanks, and took only a small sip. She wasn't fond of alcohol, but at such gatherings, appearances mattered. From there, she could see Pablo in the middle of the garden, talking animatedly with his cousin and trusted right-hand man, Gustavo Gaviria. Pablo was wearing a white guayabera, linen pants, and loafers. He looked relaxed, flashing that wide smile he only showed among friends. Gustavo, taller and thinner, gestured enthusiastically as he told some anecdote that made his cousin laugh. Both held glasses in hand. Though Victoria knew well that Pablo barely touched his drink, he preferred to stay sharp and fully aware of everything happening around him. "It's incredible what Pablo has built here," Marta said, gazing at the illuminated artificial lakes. "The last time I came, they were bringing in the giraffes." Victoria nodded, though a slight shadow crossed her face. "Yes, he loves the zoo. Says it's his own Noah's Arkansas. He spends hours flipping through that animal encyclopedia he bought in Bogota." "And the hippos?" Marta asked, genuinely interested. "They're doing well, already adapted to the river. Pablo's thrilled with them. Says they're his favorites, after the parrots." While the women continued chatting, unaware of what was about to happen, about 20 meters away near the bar, a group of men had started talking too loudly. Among them was Ricardo Morales, a mid-level emerald trader, invited by a lesser associate of the cartel. Ricardo, around 40 years old, was a stout man with a protruding belly that his patterned shirt barely contained. His flushed face and bright eyes made it obvious he had drunk too much. Around him, several colleagues were celebrating a recent business deal with laughter and toasts. He wasn't part of Escobar's inner circle. In fact, he had only seen him a few times from afar. He was one of those men who orbit around the cartel, without truly belonging to it, taking advantage of Pablo and his partner's influence to push his own business interests. "Another whiskey," shouted Ricardo to the bartender in a hoarse voice. "And make it a good one. None of that cheap stuff." The bartender, an older man with polite manners, nodded and served him patiently. Ricardo grabbed the glass without saying thank you and raised it toward his companions. "To emeralds, to money, and to beautiful women." His loud laughter echoed through the place, irritating some of the nearby guests. Alvaro, a younger man in his group, nudged him with his elbow. "Keep your voice down, Ricardo. We're in the boss's house." "So what?" He shot back arrogantly, slurring his words. "Aren't we all friends here? We're all on the same team, right?" "Yes, but you have to show respect," Alvaro insisted, glancing nervously in Pablo's direction. Ricardo waved his hand dismissively. "Relax, man. I'm being respectful. I'm just having a little fun like everyone else." He took another long sip and began scanning the area with his eyes. The music had shifted to a livelier rhythm, and several couples were already dancing on the lawn under spinning lights that created hypnotic patterns. That's when his gaze stopped on Victoria. She was still chatting with Marta on the balcony, completely unaware of the unwanted attention. The nearby lamp illuminated her face, highlighting the natural elegance of her features. "Now that's a real woman," Ricardo murmured, pointing his glass toward her. His companions followed his gaze, and one of them immediately went pale. "Ricardo, that's..." one of the companions began to say, but Ricardo was no longer listening. The alcohol had clouded his judgment until it left him reckless and clumsy. He set his glass down on the counter and, with unsteady steps, started walking toward the balcony where Victoria stood. "Ricardo, wait," Alvaro murmured urgently, but his warning went unheard. Some of Pablo's bodyguards, strong men dressed in button-up shirts and jeans, began paying attention to what was happening. One of them, nicknamed Tyson because of his flattened nose and boxer's build, took a step forward, but Gustavo stopped him with a discreet motion of his hand. He wanted to see how far the fool would go before stepping in. Ricardo stopped in front of Victoria and Marta. He forced a smile meant to look charming, but the alcohol twisted it into something unpleasant. "Good evening, ladies," he slurred. "What are two beauties like you doing all alone at this party?" Victoria and Marta exchanged glances. The former kept her composure, masking her disgust with perfect politeness. "Good evening," she replied in a neutral tone. "We're just talking." "Talking?" Ricardo burst out laughing, his voice grating. "How boring. You should be dancing, enjoying yourselves. A woman like you shouldn't waste her time just talking." Marta stiffened immediately. She knew exactly who Victoria was and understood that this scene couldn't possibly end well. "Sir, I think you should go back to your friends," she said firmly. "And why would I do that?" Ricardo shot back, stepping a little closer. "I'm much better off here with you two." The music kept playing, but on that balcony, a heavy air discomfort had settled. Several guests had already noticed what was happening and were watching closely. Some out of curiosity, others with clear concern. Victoria took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. She had learned that, in her position, a single misplaced gesture or word could have serious consequences. "Sir, I'm married," she stated firmly, though her tone remained controlled. "I ask that you please let us continue our conversation." Ricardo blinked, as if the very concept of married were difficult to process in his drunken state. "Married?" he repeated. "Well, then your husband should be here looking after you, don't you think? Because leaving such a beautiful woman alone is like inviting others to..." He never got to finish the sentence, because at that moment he clumsily reached out his hand, with the clear intention of touching Victoria's arm. And in that instant, everything changed. She took a step back, showing for the first time a genuine expression of disgust. The champagne glass trembled in her hand, and part of the liquid spilled onto her ivory dress, leaving a dark stain. "Don't touch me," she said, and though her voice wasn't raised, her words carried the sharpness of steel. She glanced down at the stain on her dress, then back at the man before her, her eyes burning with a mix of anger and disbelief. Ricardo, instead of apologizing, let out a vulgar laugh. Sorry, didn't mean to. But come on, it's not that serious. It's just a dress. With what your husband earns, I'm sure he could buy you 100 more. Marta stood up, her face pale. "Sir, you need to leave now," she ordered, her voice trembling. But Ricardo, too drunk and too arrogant, didn't grasp the gravity of the situation. Instead of stepping away, he moved even closer, invading Victoria's personal space. "Come on, don't be like that. Why don't we dance to a song? Then we can talk to your husband." What happened next was so fast that many barely noticed it. Ricardo raised his hand again, this time aiming to place his fingers on Victoria's shoulder. But before he could, she lifted her own hand and delivered a sharp slap. The crack echoed across the balcony, loud enough to momentarily drown out the music. The imprint of her fingers burned red on Ricardo's cheek as he stumbled backward, more from shock than from the strength of the blow. Silence fell. The orchestra stopped. 200 guests stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the scene at the balcony. Victoria was breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling, her hands still raised and her eyes glistening with restrained fury. Ricardo touched his face. His expression shifted in seconds, from shock to furious rage. "Bitch," he spat. "How dare you?" And then, before the horrified eyes of everyone present, he raised his arm. His clenched fist shot forward, aimed straight at Victoria, with the clear intention of hitting her. But it never reached its target. An iron hand stopped his punch in midair, just inches from her face. Ricardo turned his head confused and found himself staring into the most feared eyes in all Colombia. Pablo Escobar stood there, as if he had appeared out of thin air. His fingers gripped Ricardo's fist so tightly that the bones began to crack. What truly inspired terror wasn't Pablo's physical strength. It was the expression on his face. There was no trace of anger, no outburst of fury. His eyes were like two dark abysses, devoid of any emotion except for a cold, calculating stillness that could freeze blood. His lips formed a straight line, almost hinting at a smile that never reached his eyes. "What's going on here?" Pablo asked in a calm, almost cordial voice, though every word carried a hidden threat capable of making even the bravest men tremble. Ricardo, still under the influence of alcohol, felt that primal fear every human experiences when standing before a predator. His face, flushed from drinking, began to lose its color. I just, he stammered, trying to pull his wrist free from Pablo's iron grip. But Pablo didn't let go. Instead, he used his other hand to gently take Victoria's arm, guiding her away with care and placing himself completely between her and Ricardo. "Victoria, my love," he said, without taking his eyes off Ricardo. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she replied in a trembling voice. "But this man—" "I know," Pablo interrupted softly. "I saw everything." Those 4 words struck Ricardo like a death sentence. The rest of the guests had gathered around, forming a half circle, watching in near funereal silence. Behind Pablo stood Gustavo Gaviria, and just beyond him, a dozen bodyguards seemed to have materialized from nowhere, rising like a wall of strength and loyalty. Finally, Pablo released Ricardo's wrist, and the man pulled it back, massaging it with a pained expression. The emerald dealer tried to compose himself, though his alcohol-fogged mind was only beginning to grasp the magnitude of his mistake. "Don Pablo, I didn't know. Didn't know what?" Pablo interrupted, his calmness more dangerous than a shout. "Didn't know you were in my house? Didn't know that in my house every woman is to be respected? Or perhaps you didn't know you were putting your hands on my wife?" Each of Pablo's steps echoed like a hammer against Ricardo's chest. The silence was suffocating. Even the air seemed heavier. When he finally stopped in front of him, Pablo tilted his head slightly, as if weighing his options before deciding what to do. You know, Ricardo, he said in a calm, almost paternal tone, I learned a long time ago that respect isn't asked for, it's imposed. And this house, he tapped his chest firmly. Stand for that. Ricardo trembled.
Get down.
He tried to mumble something, but no sound came out. I didn't mean to, he murmured, on the verge of tears. Pablo silenced him with a single look. Didn't mean to, he repeated, his voice serene yet razor-sharp. Then tell me, why did you touch her? Why did you insist when she asked you back away?
Get down.
The man lowered his head, unable to respond. Pablo let out a long sigh, more disappointed than angry. What a shame. So many good people out there waiting for a chance, and there's always some fool who mistakes kindness for weakness. He stepped aside and looked at Gustavo. Take him outside. I want him to learn the meaning of the word respect. Ricardo turned completely pale. He tried to move, but two guards were already holding him by the arms. Please, Don Pablo, have mercy, he pleaded in a trembling voice. I swear I've learned my lesson. Pablo averted his gaze, as if the man was no longer worth listening to. This lesson is for everyone, he said, turning toward the guests. So no one ever forgets it in this house. Whoever dishonors a woman dishonors me. The men dragged Ricardo toward the garden. With the sound of their footsteps and the murmur of the crowd faded into the darkness. Victoria watched everything with a pale, yet resolute face. Pablo approached her, his expression softening. Are you all right, my love? He asked quietly. She nodded without saying a word. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders and led her inside, whispering, It's over. Don't worry. No one will ever disrespect you again here. Behind them, the music began to play once more, but no one dared to dance. The estate, which minutes earlier had overflowed with laughter and alcohol, now breathed fear, a fear that, like Pablo Escobar himself, had become part of the very atmosphere. Do you know what I'm going to do with you?
Get down.
Pablo esquete, sopping in front of him. Ricardo shook his head, unable to utter a single word. Pablo's millet. It was not a pleasant smile. Nothing. For now, I do nothing.
Get down.
A murmur rippled through the crowd. Even Gustavo looked surprised. But don't be mistaken, Pablo continued, and the silence returned instantly. This is over. What happens next will depend on you. Ricardo blinked, confused. On me? Exactly. Pablo nodded. He believed in second chances. Not always, but sometimes. And this will be yours. Do you let have to earn it? Everyone vai ter intense anticipation. Tomorrow, at 9 o'clock sharp in the morning, you will be at my office in Medellin. You know where it is. Yes, Don Pablo, Ricardo whispered. Good. You will arrive on time, sober, and with a sincere apology prepared. Not just an apology to me, but above all, to my wife. Then we will discuss how you plan to make up for what you did tonight. Pablo paused before adding, in a chilling tone. If you don't show up, or if you're even a minute late, I'll take it as a sign that you don't value the opportunity I'm giving you. And I assure you, you will deeply regret that decision. Was it clear? Yes, Don Pablo. Perfectly clear. I'll be there. I promise. Don't promise me. Pablo corrected him. Promise her. Ricardo turned toward Victoria. Tears of fear and shame welling in his eyes. Senora, I'm terribly sorry. There's no excuse for what you did. I'll be at the office tomorrow. If we are on my mother's life, I'll make it right. Victoria looked at him in silence for a long moment. Finally, she nodded, with a dignity that impressed everyone. Pablo gestured to his men. Take him away. Get him off my property. And Jairo, you're leaving too. Come back when you will learn to show your friends more visibly. The guards hold Ricardo and Jairo, escorting them into the darkness beyond the gardens. The guests stepped aside, watching in silence. Once they were gone, Pablo turned back to the crowd. His expression had regained the cordiality of a refined host. Ladies and gentlemen, I deeply regret this incident, but it is be resolved. Let's continue the party. Orchestra, please. The music returned fast mid, then stronger. The guests resume their conversations, though the main topic remained what they had just witnessed. Pablo walked over to Victoria, gently taking her by the arms. Are you all right, my love? He asked with genuine concern. Yes, I'm fine. Just surprised.
Get down.
Surprised by what? His audacity. No, she replied. By your reaction.
Get down.
E thought you would kill him right there. Pablo smiled faintly. There's a team and a place for everything, Victoria. This is your party, in your home. You must going to sign it with unnecessary violence.
Get down.
She looked into his eyes, saying something few ever did, the man behind the MYH. Deus will care about her well-being. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me for protecting what you love most in this world, Pablo replied, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. Then Gustavo approached. Patron, do you want someone to keep an eye on that man? Pablo thought for a moment. Yes. Have him follow at home, but discreetly. You want to know whether he shows up tomorrow or tries to run. Understood, Gustavo said, walking off to give the order. Marta, who had remained busy Victoria, finally spoke. Would you like me to go inside with you? Or should you bring something to fix your dress? Victoria looked down at the champagne sign on radio wind, to both women's surprise. Let out a small laugh. It does not matter, Marta. In the end, it is just a dress. As that fool had said, Pablo could buy her 100 more dresses. But unlike Ricardo, his words carried no arrogance. Only a dark humor born from the absurdity of what had just happened. Pablo smiled with genuine affection. That's my Victoria. Nothing brings her down. Slowly, the celebration found its rhythm again, though the atmosphere had changed. The guests had been reminded of what the festive mood had briefly made them forget. They were standing in the home of the most feared man in Colombia, and that man defended what was his with absolute resolve. In one corner of the garden, two young cartel hitmen spoke in low voices. Did you see that? Asked one of them, a man barely in his 20s with a thin mustache. The boss let that guy walk away too easily. The other, more experienced, shook his head. Don't be naive, Julian. The boss didn't let him go free. He's just waiting. Waiting for what? To see if the guy's dumb enough not to show up tomorrow. And if he does, to see whether his excuse satisfies the boss, said the hitman, taking a sip of his beer. Either way, that man's already dead. He just doesn't know it yet. Julian tried to process that with the limited experience his youth allowed. But why wait? Why not just finish him off right there? Because the boss thinks coldly, the older one explained. If he kills him here at his own party, in front of so many politicians and powerful people, it would look bad. Like he's just some brute who can't control himself. He leaned closer and added, but if he gives a man a chance and the fool wastes it, then he chooses his own fate. It's cleaner, more elegant. Julian nodded, thinking he understood, though not entirely convinced. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the garden, the Ochoa brothers were discussing what had happened. Jorge Luis, the eldest, smoked a cigar while watching Pablo mingle with the guests as if nothing had occurred. We have to admit, he said calmly, Pablo knows how to handle these things. Anyone else would have pulled a gun, and it would have turned into a bloodbath. Fabio, the youngest, nodded, but we all know it won't end here. That guy made an unforgivable mistake. Exactly, added one David, the middle brother. Pablo's just playing his strategy. Remember the man who disrespected him 2 years ago? Pablo also gave him a chance, he said, making air quotes. The man had vanished a week later. No one ever heard from him again. The three brothers understood that what they had witnessed wasn't a mere incident, but a display of power, a public lesson in what happened when someone crossed a line. After chatting a little longer with Marta and receiving support from several guests, Victoria decided to retire to the mansion. Pablo walked her to the entrance, making sure she was all right. Are you sure you don't want me to end the party? He asked, ready to send everyone home if she wished. No, Pablo, Don't let that idiot ruin your friend's celebration. I just need to change and rest a bit. Do you want me to come up with you? Victoria kissed him softly. Stay with your guests. I'll be upstairs. If I need you, I'll call. Pablo watched her climb the marble staircase until she disappeared on the second floor. Then he returned to the party, where Gustavo awaited with a glass of whiskey. I already sent Tyson and El Negro to follow him, Gustavo informed. They'll keep an eye on him all night. Good, said Pablo, taking a sip. Tomorrow we'll have a very interesting conversation with Mr. Morales. Do you think he'll show up? Some men know when their life depends on a decision. Others are too foolish and dig their own graves. Tomorrow we'll find out which kind Ricardo Morales is. The party lasted until dawn. The orchestra never stopped playing. Champagne continued to flow, and gradually the incident faded from the guests' minds, replaced by laughter and music. Yet those who truly knew Pablo Escobar understood that the real show was only beginning, and that with sunrise would come the next act. When the last guest left and the sky turned shades of pink and gold, Pablo went up to his room. Victoria was fast asleep. He stood silently by the window, gazing at his private zoo as the animals stirred awake. In his mind, he was already rehearsing exactly what he would say to Ricardo Morales, prepared for both outcomes, whether the man showed up or didn't. The night at Hacienda Napoles had ended, but the story of Ricardo Morales and his mistake was only beginning. And in Pablo Escobar's world, mistakes always came with a price. The Patron smiled faintly as the sun rose over his empire. It's going to be a very interesting day. Ricardo Morales, meanwhile, had no idea how he'd made it home. Everything that happened after he was escorted out of the state was a blur of fear, nausea, and confusion. The only thing he remembered clearly was that at some point he ended up sitting on his couch, still in his floral shirt, drenched in sweat, trembling as if with fever. His apartment was in Laureles, a middle-upper-class neighborhood in Medellin, home to merchants and professionals. It was an 8-story brick building, and he lived on the 5th floor. Usually, he felt proud to have bought it after years in the emerald trade. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a terrace with a view of the mountains. But that night, it wasn't a refuge. It was a prison. The moonlight cast unsettling shadows. Ricardo staggered into the bathroom and stared at his reflection. He barely recognized a man staring back, pale, with dark circles and bloodshot eyes. His cheek still bore the mark of Victoria's slap. My God, what have I done? What have I done? He whispered. He splashed cold water on his face, unable to calm the panic. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Escobar's icy stare, the gaze of a man who could decide his death as easily as others ordered a coffee. The clock on the wall read 3:15 a.m. He had less than 6 hours before facing Escobar. Sleeping was out of the question. Every attempt brought flashes of his impending death. He tried to drink a glass of water, but his hands trembled so badly that he spilled it on his pants. He buried his face in his hands, consumed by despair. How had he sunk so low? Yes, the alcohol had clouded his judgment, but that wasn't an excuse. He had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. The sound of an engine outside made him jump. He rushed to the window, his heart pounding in his ears. It was just a taxi. No one had come for him yet, but he felt watched. He was certain Escobar's men were following him from the shadows. Desperate, he paced back and forth. A poisonous thought crossed his mind. Run away. He could gather some money, pack a few bags, and escape to Ecuador, Venezuela, or even farther. Change his name and start over from scratch. But he quickly dismissed the idea. Pablo's reach extended across the entire continent. Running would only mean signing his own death sentence. No. The only option was to show up at the meeting, beg for forgiveness, and pray that the boss would show mercy. But what excuse could ever be enough? What words could erase the fact that he had harassed the wife of the most powerful man in the country, stained her dress, and worse, tried to assault her? A new wave of nausea hit him, and he ran to the bathroom to vomit. On his knees on the cold floor, he wept, his voice trembling. Please, God, let me live. I swear I'll never drink again. I'll never do anything like this again. Just let me live. At 4 a.m, he got up, determined to bring something that would show his remorse. Not money, Escobar had more than anyone could imagine. Not jewelry either. But then he remembered his private emerald collection. 12 exceptional stones he had kept for years. His greatest treasure. He took them out of the safe, and under the light, they shimmered with a hypnotic green glow. They were worth more than $200,000, nearly his entire fortune. He wrapped them in velvet and placed them in a cedar box decorated with inlays. "Let this be enough, please," he murmured. The hours dragged by with torturous slowness. At 6, he showered, shaved, and put on his best suit. Dark gray wool, white shirt, blue tie, polished shoes. The reflection in the mirror looked more dignified, but the fear was still in his eyes. At 7, he stepped outside. He decided not to take his Renault and chose a taxi instead. The cool Medellin air surrounded him as he thought that perhaps this might be his last morning. He gave the driver a false address, the Cottager building, though he knew his real destination was another, more discreet place. He got out 2 blocks early and walked to the glass-fronted building where Escobar kept his office under a fake company name. It was 8:30. He had arrived half an hour early. Punctuality is enough. I need to show seriousness, he thought. He took the elevator to the 5th floor, holding the box on his lap as if it were a life preserver. The receptionist greeted him politely and confirmed his appointment. The 20-minute wait felt eternal, until finally, at exactly 9 o'clock, the door opened. Gustavo Gaviria appeared, his presence commanding despite his simple clothes. "Mr. Morales, Don Pablo will see you now."
Get down.
Ricardo stood up, clutching the box tightly in his hands. He entered the spacious office, furnished with a mahogany desk and large windows. There sat Pablo Escobar, dressed in white, reviewing some papers. He looked up, and his dark eyes pierced Ricardo with the same coldness as the night before. "Good morning, Mr. Morales," he said with dry politeness. "You arrived on time. That's good." "Good morning, Don Pablo," Ricardo replied, barely above a whisper. "Sit down." Ricardo obeyed, while Gustavo closed the door and remained standing, watchful. Pablo leaned back in his chair, studying Ricardo in silence for a long moment. Pablo remained silent for several seconds, letting the weight of the tension crush Ricardo. His dark, impenetrable eyes seemed to dissect him, stripping him bare from the inside out. Finally, he spoke. "So, Mr. Morales," he said with an icy calm, "do you have something to say to me?" Ricardo swallowed hard. His hands were sweating so much that he could barely hold the cedar case. With a trembling motion, he placed it on the desk and slid it toward Pablo. "Don Pablo," he stammered, "I made an unforgivable mistake. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. I disrespected your wife. And there's no excuse for that. I just want to beg your forgiveness, even if I have to get down on my knees. I brought this, not as payment, because I know there's no way to pay for what I did, but as a sign of remorse." Pablo opened the case. Under the office light, the emeralds glowed with intense brilliance, green as a sunlit rainforest. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he closed the box and pushed it aside, as if it meant absolutely nothing. "You know what's curious, Morales?" he asked in a soft, almost friendly tone. "That you think your life is worth those stones." Ricardo lowered his head, unable to meet his gaze. I just want to live, Don Pablo. I'll do whatever you say." Pablo leaned back in his chair and watched him in silence. The office felt colder, as if even the air were waiting for a verdict. "Last night," Escobar continued, "you had the audacity to touch what I value most in this world. And yet here you are, breathing in front of me. That alone should tell you I'm a more patient man than most people think." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "But I'm also a man who doesn't forget." Ricardo felt the ground open beneath his feet. "I'll give you 2 options, Morales," Pablo said firmly. "The first, you disappear from Medellin today. Leave your business, your apartment, everything, and never again let your shadow cross mine or my family's. You walk away with nothing but the clothes on your back like a beaten dog. And you thank God every day that you're still breathing." Pablo paused, lit a cigarette, and exhaled slowly. "The second is that my men take care of you right here, right now." The silence became unbearable. Ricardo felt his heart about to explode. He looked at the case of emeralds,
Get down.
then at Pablo, and finally dared to speak. "I'll leave, Don Pablo. I swear, today,
Get down.
you'll never hear from me again."
What's that?
Pablo nodded slowly, as if he had expected that answer from the very beginning.
Down.
Very well. He took a deep drag from the cigarette. Gustavo escorted him to the door.
Get down.
Ricardo rose unsteadily, his legs like paper. He still couldn't believe he was alive. As he left the office,
Get down.
he felt Pablo's cold gaze drilling into his back, a warning more powerful than any words. When the door
down.
closed behind him, Pablo sat in silence for a moment, then turned to Gustavo. "Either way, send two men to follow him. I want to be sure he keeps his word. And if he doesn't, you know what to do." Gustavo nodded, needing no further instruction. Across the city, as the taxi carried him away from the office, Ricardo breathed with difficulty,
What's that?
like a condemned man who'd just been granted a last-minute reprieve. But deep down,
Get down.
he knew his fate was already sealed. He had looked into the eyes of Pablo Escobar up close and understood that no mistake went unpunished. Life had given him one last chance, and perhaps, just perhaps, that chance wouldn't last long.
What's that?
Get down.